We've tailored this session so that you'll get some information that you can bring back and actually affect the way you do some of your work. I'm Jonathan Adelson. I help facilitate this session, and I'd like to thank the MOC committee for helping us organize this, especially Terry Miller, the vice chair, who also was the session lead for this entire track, and Teresa O'Connell, who helped introduce me to the moderator, and she's also our scribe. But down in front here, thank you very much, Teresa. We're having a non-conference session that's a little bit different than the maybe preceding one. We have a panel of two, so we can get a kind of talking heads fireside chat or mini debate going, depending on what style you like. We keep it civil, but the two organizations represented have different perspectives because of the communities that they serve, and you'll see that pretty quickly. The moderator and the panelists have worked with me to shape this so that we're going to do a very quick round of introductions of the people and then of the organizations that they serve, and then we'll immediately open it up to questions. And we have some targeted questions to stimulate the group in case you happen to be shyer than the last group that was here. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. She's Dr. Paulette Robinson, who is the Associate Dean for Teaching, Learning, and Technology for the iCollege at the National Defense University. She manages the e-learning solutions group, a distributed learning instructional design group, and reviews emerging technologies and implements technology and facilitates instructional use of technology for the college. Especially relevant for today's session, Dr. Robinson is the leader of the Federal Consortium for Virtual Worlds, a group of over 2,200 from government at all levels, federal, state, local, and international, industry and academia who are interested in the use of virtual worlds for government, confronting and solving common issues as well as sharing best practices. So let's all welcome Dr. Robinson.
Cool. We only have 3 PowerPoints. It's really going to be a discussion. I'd like to introduce the guests, and then I'm going to set up the topic just a little bit. I've got 5 minutes, so you know it's going to go fast. We're going to have each of our panelists have 5 minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. So, our first panelist is Lavisa Williams, and she is the Senior Social Media Strategist at the Department of State. She also has 14 years in government, and she's developed the first social media use of policy. So she's been really involved at an early stage in policy. She's out of the Public Diplomacy Office. She's the co-chair for the Sub-Council for Social Media, and she's part of the Web 2.0 grassroots effort. So she has been involved in this from a very interesting point of development, and one of the neatest experts in this particular area by doing, not just by kind of studying or this is what would be good, but by doing. Alex Volpesis, and I don't know if I said that right, so I'm sorry, Alex.
Close enough.
He's been coaching me. Currently serves as the CTO and Chief Engineer of Planning and Innovation Division for Interlink. He used to be working with the CTO for the Intelligence Community Chief Information Officer Enterprise Engineering Organization. I met Alex when I went to he holds the coolest innovation forums for his group, and they explore different kinds of innovations, and he invited me over to talk about virtual worlds. So I had an interesting experience, not only of virtual worlds, but to see what they were doing. And they were very early on figuring out how to use these different types of social media tools and different kinds of collaborations that can now be affected in this environment. We're trying to think of digital natives. So who the heck are digital natives? Well, digital natives were born in the 90s. The term was coined by Mark Prensky. But it's really about they've never been unconnected. Now, I could say I use technology and try to work hard at using different types of technology. And sort of as a baby boomer, I have to choose and work hard at technology. They're in the stream and flow, but they don't know any different. Isn't that amazing? I can't even ponder what the brain way of processing information based on that type of thinking. Now, Lavisa, so baby boomers are trying hard and trying to catch up, right? And every time I have to learn new technology, it's very painful. Lavisa, who's a Gen Xer, well, I have 2 children that are Gen Xers, they're the mediators for us with this new digital native group because they're using it And as adults, through most of their working adult life, they've been using the digital media and digital information technology. So it's sort of this interesting tension in the workplace now. And unfortunately for us, is the baby boomers are the ones that are leading, and they're working hard at the technology, and they get a little overwhelmed. And yet, in order to keep the digital natives in our workplace, we're really going to have to start thinking about what does that mean in terms of collaboration, communication. Otherwise, they're going to go to industry because the best and the brightest, their industry is going to find a place for them to collaborate because that's where the new innovations are coming from. So in government, if we want to keep our talent, and this is really necessary for the future, we have to enable an environment. I have a computer at the moment that's a brick. I don't even bother to bring it home when I telework because it's a brick. So, I mean, we have to start thinking about what we can enable for these very connected, creative people to innovate in our workplaces. So what I'd first like to do is turn this over to Lisa to talk a little bit about the State Department.
Thank you, Paulette. You guys hear me? Yes, there we go. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background about who I am and sort of where I fit in the organization. About 3 years ago, we developed, as an experiment, a new shop that we called the Office of Innovative Engagement. And that office was one of the first of its kind. It was originally set up to support the public diplomacy mission. It is now broadened out to not only support public diplomacy, but all of the missions that we have at the department. So we are funded by public diplomacy, and yet we service all bureaus who have a mission to engage with the public. So part of my role is not only to help people better leverage social media and other emerging technologies, both in an effective and responsible way, but also develop policies to figure out how do we address some of the security issues, the privacy issues, the First Amendment right issues that go along with using things like emerging technology. So some of the platforms here are some of the ones that we're using. Obviously, ones being shown are the most popular being used at State Department. We have over 2,000 social media accounts that we're using to engage the public every day. So that's a lot of accounts to manage. People say, well, don't you have a strategy? Where's your strategy for this? And I look for a centralized strategy. And we purposely have developed a distributed strategy because we wanted to develop communities that focus on engaging people in that local environment and that are customized for that local environment, both for culture and for language. So for us, it's all about how do we build communities? How do we better engage the public in issues that are in concern with our foreign policy and also our culture? Who are we as Americans? What makes us Americans? What makes us different? What makes us the same compared to other countries around the world? So we're also the people who start bringing in these new technologies. We have to be where our customers are. For us, our customers are citizens around the world that we're trying to engage with. So that means I don't have a choice of saying, well, you know, Facebook is the largest social network in the world. I think we should be using Facebook. Well, maybe in Brazil, if I'm trying to engage with, someone who's less educated, it's not Facebook. It might be Orkut. There's also in China, like at least 7 different social networks there, none of which happen to be Facebook. So the answer is not always what I would like to do as a government or as an individual. It's I have to use what technology the people I'm trying to engage with are actually using. So when we talk about how we implement Government 2.0 or social media emerging technology, whatever you want to call it, for us, Government 2.0 is really about how do we implement the 3 ideals from the Open Government Directive. So provide a transparent, participatory, collaborative form of government. How do we use technology to do that? It's more than just about these new tools that are disruptive, that are changing. How do we think about what we do for work? What are the processes that we're using for that work? It's also about the policies that we're using, the laws that are already there. The laws were invented and didn't take into account all these new forms of technology. So now we have these constructive dialogues going on about how is it that we take the spirit of the law and what we were thinking about when we design these laws and apply it to these new technologies where the rules from those laws may not really apply. And it's an interesting challenge. That whole concept of community is big for us. How do we continue to build all these communities around the world? And of course, probably the hardest thing here is changing the culture of our environment. How do we get people thinking about, being more open and sharing with their information? Government traditionally, we hoard information. hoarding information was power, right? Well, we have this shift going on where sharing is now power. So how do we go about changing people to recognize they can better effectively use those tools through, changing how they're doing work? It may be changing a process, but it's more important to say, nobody owns emerging technology or social media. You can't own it. Everybody can go out and blog or tweet or put things on Facebook. Well, that's really scary for us. And change is scary. So how do we manage that change in a way that's appropriate for our individual missions? So these are some of the things that we think about when we're thinking about how do we move the Department of State to this new kind of government 2.0 form of an agency. And of course, we have, as we're talking about here today, we have all these new users coming in. People who are bringing their own devices that are adding more challenges to this. And they have already been ingrained in this kind of thinking. So we have this somewhat clash of philosophies where the old way of doing business, which was very command and control centric, right, to a much more collaborative, sharing, flat organization. That change is not necessarily comfortable, but it's something we need to recognize as we start moving forward in order to be successful.
So going from the public-facing, how do we respond to digital natives, and the variety of actually cultures or age groups within our public sphere. Alex, do you want to talk about the internal use of these?
Maybe go back one slide, possibly? Go backwards. Here we go. First of all, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. Jonathan, Paulette, Lisa, wonderful opportunity, and for the folks that are in the room today, appreciate you taking the time to listen with us. But what Lisa talked to on the outside, we as Intel provide on the inside. When I say inside, 1994, Deputy Secretary of Defense and the DCI, the Director of Central Intelligence, said, hey, we need to begin to think differently. And I'll leverage the quote from Kennedy, change is the law of life. If you only look to the past or the present, you will miss the future. Said, we needed to leverage technologies in 1994, web technologies as they were becoming available. So in 1994, Interlink was stood up to provide services, these type of services, 1994, to share, collaborate, discover, for the intelligence community in the Department of Defense. That's where it started. And when I say on the inside, we operate, maintain, and deliver these type services on the top secret, and unclassified. When I say unclassified, not public-facing, but unclassified, the controlled unclassified information environment. We provide a portfolio of enterprise services, sharing, collaboration, and discovery on the inside for collaboration, sharing. But at the end of the day, it's for information dominance. It's for information advantage. As Lavisa talked to, flattening the organization, democratizing information. We become topic-focused, and where topics no longer fit in little buckets. Topics that are a common concern that transcend buckets. When I say buckets, within the intelligence community, there's a variety of agencies that focus on signals intelligence, human intelligence, geospatial intelligence. Well, at the end of the day, if these buckets can't come together, and the people and the products can't work together, can't share and collaborate, because nothing tightly fits in those buckets anymore. Whether it's a bucket by intelligence or a bucket by country or region, things are transnational now. Things transcend organizational boundaries. Things transcend intelligence boundaries. So working together, there's a reasonable expectation, more than reasonable expectation, of digital natives and the guys that have been around a while to be able to share and collaborate. What we've done as Interlink is we generally don't build things, but we adopt things that folks are familiar with and used to on the outside. You see Twitter, you see YouTube, WordPress, Flickr. We generally have delivered all those same tools and technologies, again, on the top secret, and unclassified, to democratize intelligence, to streamline the flow of information, to allow a guy or gal in Korea to collaborate with a guy or gal anywhere else in the world in real time, 24/7, wherever they happen to be, whether they're in the same organization or a different one, they can work together. So fundamentally, we have about 260,000 active users, and they all have a role in defending and protecting our country, the freedoms we have today, using these technologies, and they're expected that we deliver them, and that they're available 24/7 and they work. And there's expectation that they're not going to have to learn new things. The same tools and technologies that they use at home, that they use on the outside, we're offering on the inside. We can't quite go as fast as they can, or VC can on the outside, because we have some of the challenges of confidentiality, integrity, and availability that we really, really need to uphold. But fundamentally, it's the same thing that Lisa talked from the outside and the inside. And again, thanks for the opportunity to talk and answer questions.
Okay, so we've discussed sort of public facing and internal facing, and a basic, just a little bit of information about the digital natives, because you know them. They're your kids, your grandkids, some of the young workers in your organizations, and what they expect from the workplace, and how they keep asking questions. Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? So what we'd like to do is put up a slide with the culture shift, sort of some of these issues that really we start facing. And we're going to leave that up while you ask questions. So we'd really like this to be more of a dialogue than us presenting. So we want to give you sort of a lay of the landscape, but now we'd like to just open it up to questions. So anybody have any questions about digital natives or how those types of things are being implemented both externally or public facing and internally? Anybody?
I also work at the State Department, and I actually have a question about, you're talking about all the official Flickr and Facebook posting, but how exactly is the state and other organizations handling all these digital natives who come in with existing accounts that you put on your Facebook, I work at the State Department, and just kind of the implications there of all the unofficial ways that information is getting out?
So it's a really great question. In fact, we run a help desk called OIE Support that provides internal support to all of our embassies and consulates as well as bureaus to answer questions just like this. The way our policy is written, it's very broad-based, and it's written that way on purpose because we wanted to have the flexibility to provide guidance for your specific situation. So for instance, I had someone who came in who was in the process of becoming a Department of State employee. They saw misinformation being posted on the internet about how to get hired at State Department. And because they were going through this process and actually were just waiting on their clearance, they wanted to go out and respond to this. And they said, can I respond to this? And for all intents and purposes, we had no problems with them doing that because it was misinformation. They did have a credible way to link back to the original sources. So where possible, we ask people to link back. We don't prevent people from blogging, we don't prevent people from tweeting or any of those kinds of things, but we do have certain rules about how do you do that. And basic rules are, be very clear if it's going to be in your personal capacity or professional capacity. Sometimes with social media it gets very gray, so training is a big thing. When we have people, new employees, it doesn't matter what age you are, coming into the enterprise, they do get education and training about some of these issues. But if you're going to write your blog and it's going to be about foreign policy and how you don't like our foreign policy, yeah, you need to get that cleared through public affairs. They're not really going to appreciate that. But if you're an expert in let's say, trade and you happen to be doing writing a paper or something that's not very specific to your job, then that's fine. You just have to have the disclaimer on there that states, these are your personal views, not connected to the department. Of course, this issue does come up with the use of LinkedIn. Do you say that you work for the Department of State? And a lot of it will depend on what is your job. Are you able to talk about what your job is? Because we do have people who are in sensitive positions or are located in sensitive places around the world. So we ask them to first think about potential loss of life issues and security issues that go along with that. So we do provide guidance on all of those things.
Good morning. For speaking on the cultural shift and the training perspective, have you thought or have you implemented any formal training that allows mentoring up with these digital natives who come in knowing the technology already and understanding this technology? Have you thought about putting in a training program that would mentor up for some of our older folks who, like myself, who don't understand the technology as well?
We do offer a variety of training, mentoring up, but we found that when the demographics... we found, maybe I should stay seated, demographics of users The breakdown is consistent across the board, from the youngest to the oldest in participating, which is surprising to many of us. Again, I reiterate, we do offer formal training, and if I can, I'll step back one. We try our best to leverage what's on the outside, so there's minimal training. For us to scale to the enterprise, for us to scale to the world, if training is required, I use the Gmail concept. I saw the Google booth down the hall. Is there really training for Gmail, using Gmail? That's the way we try to look at our service portfolio. Simple, timely, agile, robust, and self-service. So minimal training is required. But when there is, yes, we have, it's part of the curriculum. But again, the demographics don't show a distinction between the uptake on the high side in terms of age demographics and the low side, the younger guys and gals coming into the community. They're all using these capabilities across the board.
So for us, we actually do have a number of mentorship programs. None are specifically focused on the use of social media or emerging technologies. We do have a formal school called the Foreign Service Institute where we have 2 different social media courses that are being run. One of them is Introduction to Social Media. The other is Social Media for Practitioners. Those are available for any government employee who is interested in taking them, but they're very formal classes and they don't always meet the needs that we have of either new employees coming in or the fact that you have a specific job that doesn't maybe fit how everyone else is using social media or emerging technology within the department. So we do offer custom training for those people or for a specific embassy or consulate based on your business requirements.
If I can add, we found that the way we think these technologies will be used in the workplace is sometimes not accurate at all. We try not to make assumptions, and I go back to we've offered what's known as Media Wikipedia on the outside and the inside, Encyclopedia. And when we originally fielded it, we thought it would be an encyclopedic collection of content. But instead, it's been a collaborative environment that's issue-focused, issue-centric, and that serves discrete mission needs. In fact, it's so robust, about 45,000 edits a day of Encyclopedia on the inside. And there's classes that are offered, but they're generally mission-specific. Pick an area of the world where there's a specific mission going. It's how to leverage that technology for that specific mission, as opposed to a broad brush, how to do blogging or how to simply integrate these capabilities, how to leverage these capabilities in your mission. Everything, I go back to the word mission. Yeah, there is social, but generally the things that occur on the inside, they're very mission specific. So it's how to use the equivalent of Twitter for tipping and queuing, how to use Encyclopedia to round up folks around the world to contribute to a position on X or Y.
I'd also say that, one of the things we've found is that new people or young people coming into the organization have different kind of training needs as compared to older people. So for instance, we don't have to teach them how to use the tool per se. Like they know how to post things on Facebook, they know how to tweet. What they don't know is how do you do that for government? How do you, like all the laws and policies that we have, how do you be an authoritative voice? How do you manage an online community? We throw this word engagement around like everybody knows what it means. But a lot of people don't, especially government. We're not used to talking in a casual tone of voice and talking to people like real human beings. We've always been the authoritative source for all information that went out. Why? Because, well, we're the government. Hello? Don't you know we're important? But the reality of the situation is now the role is reversed. We need to listen more, and we need to be a facilitator of those conversations versus always the leader of those conversations. So some of that teaching also goes to other generations. But like I said, everyone assumes that a younger person coming into the organization, oh, you're going to be the community manager. Why? But you're young. You know how to use that stuff. Well, we say, well, that's great, but they don't necessarily understand the organization. They don't understand our foreign policy issues and the history that goes along with that, and who the subject matter expert may be when they need to turn it over. So it's one of the reasons why we say, yes, it's great that they know the tools, but they need other forms of training on top.
For public-facing websites, For public-facing websites, to reach the digital natives, what are you doing differently? Are there design implications? Are you making the sites more interactive? How are you trying to do that?
So we have actually been looking at a number of different models. We used to have, so there are two different websites, or there were two different websites for the State Department. There is state.gov, which most of you have probably seen and think of as the website for the State Department. There was also a website called America.gov. And America.gov was specifically focused on the engagement of non-Americans overseas. So there's a law called Smith-Munn that prevented us from speaking to domestic audiences. That was for public affairs, that was for the rest of the department, but in a public diplomacy perspective, we were only supposed to be speaking to non-Americans. So we built this great site, and it had tons of information, and it was going really well, and we started adding blogging and social features to that in order to reach out to those younger people and everything else. And an interesting thing happened. We started looking at who was actually coming to our site, and it was a little scary, because who was coming to our site were not the people we really wanted to engage with. All the people we wanted to engage with were going to the site that you guys think of as the State Department site too, the state.gov site. Well, duh. Of course, that's where you go for State Department information. They weren't coming to our site. What we had instead were Americans, mostly academics, white, 35 to 55. Yeah, that's not really our target group that we were trying to engage with. And so we did a very unheard of thing. We actually got rid of that site. There you go. Government actually got rid of something. And so we've scaled it back, and we don't have that website anymore. What we have instead is we've become a content shop. All the embassies and consulates are now mirroring the same thing we're doing with social media. So we have websites that are specific to a geographic location. So every embassy and consulate has one. We don't necessarily have this big website that we used to have. It's a much more scaled down presence. Now, obviously, Public Affairs still runs the traditional state.gov one. They're doing a lot of experimentation there, both with mobile, agile design, and other ways to make things more interactive. We do live streaming and all sorts of other things to try and help engage those users.
I'd like to just for a minute refocus the panel and ask them about, so in terms of the IT environment, are the digital natives driving the IT environment to be different? And if so, how are they driving that to be different? I mean, what's the impact?
I think the biggest driver today is cost. That personally believe, professionally believe that cost is the biggest driver. And it's forcing us to work smarter. And I think the things that we're doing to meet the needs of cost containment, cost constraints, and efficiencies are facilitating, enabling what the digital natives wanted us to do to begin with. The cost equation, doing it the old way as opposed to the new way, the Lisa's slides, these things are cost effective to field at an enterprise. When I say enterprise, I'm talking broad community enterprise, national security enterprise level. Doing these web-based technologies the same way that the industry does it on the outside, us doing it on the inside, is helping us twofold. Many things. Mission number one. Number two, helping with cost. And oh, by the way, it's meeting the needs of the digital natives at the same time. So it's good convergence at this junction.
Yeah, my CIO's office definitely thinks that I'm the most annoying customer because I come in and say, hey, we need to use this tool because that's where my people are. And, unfortunately, we don't necessarily have the infrastructure to be able to do that. Like, most of my community managers cannot manage their communities from their desktops. They actually have to have a separate internet connection to do that. So we are looking at how do we better enable those community managers to do their job and rethinking. And I do agree with Alex about, it's a nice convergence of we can save some money and also provide the functionality that people are looking for. So that's definitely a benefit, but we're definitely pushing that really hard in terms of, how do we get these new technologies so that we can use them in a responsible and effective way, whether it's tablets or iPads or iPhones or whatever around the world that we need to use. That's definitely also a challenge because there are security things that we need to balance out with that.
So Alex, how do you balance the security pieces then for where you are?
I go back to the simple equation, or two, confidentiality, integrity, and availability is the utmost importance. In the standard equation, you have threats, vulnerabilities, minus countermeasures equal risk. We've taken a risk management as opposed to a risk-averse approach to quantifying the threats, quantifying the vulnerabilities, and then looking at countermeasures that we put in place. And it's defense in depth from the outside to the inside. And I guess right now the focus, number one, is on identity. We're having confidence and assurance that guy or gal on the other end is who you think they are. And everything starts there. And then with identity, with auditing, again, defense in depth. There's many layers of laying with defense in depth. And then it's, the overarching is mission without compromising the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and then countermeasures to manage the risk. And then we're willing to take a measured risk to accomplish the mission. So together we can be successful. The days are over where, we used to have the office of no, where it was the security office, and simply their job, it seemed, was to say no. The group of no, the office of no, the division of no. Now they understand, how do we get to yes without compromising it? Go back to the same three fundamental tenets. We can't compromise confidentiality, integrity, and availability, but we can't always say no. If we say no, we found that the guys and gals are smart, and in many cases smarter than the guys that are providing the capabilities, and they'll figure out a way to meet their needs. So if we don't, at the corporate level, provide the technologies, and go back to Lisa's slides, those capabilities, their expectations are there. If we don't provide them, they'll figure out a way, and it won't have possibly the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If it means going on the outside to do their work, if they're not providing them on the inside. So that's the incentive to do it right, do it now, or the users will become irrelevant.
And we do have that problem at State. I mean, I unfortunately get the call from people who said, well, I didn't have the right tool to do what I wanted to do on the enterprise, so I'm using Google Docs because I've got a grantee organization and an NGO and another agency, and there's no collaborative platform that we can all use together. And I said, what are you posting on it? Because as much as I'm all about saying yes, occasionally I do have to actually say no. But we try to give them options as well, and instruct them on, yes, you can post certain things out there, but you need to understand what it is that you're posting, how are you posting it, and the fact that there is nothing secure outside of our enterprise network.
Thank you. I'm Bill Hocking with the Ken Blanchard Companies, and this is actually to all three of you, kind of going back to this focus on learning, training, and people are assets, arguably are the most important resources and things that we have. It's not the technology, it's our people. And the concern that across the agencies that there's this brain drain of not just the traditionalists retiring, the boomers retiring, but the X's and the Y's leaving to go to private sector because they don't feel valued. So I guess the question is, as some of the boomers and X's find ourselves being managed potentially by Y's, is there an awareness or a concern at the agency level that these Y's need not just to know how to use tools, which they do, they don't have the experience of leadership and managing people that are older than them. So what's the perception and the concern at the agency level that if we're going to retain these people and value them and give them positions of leadership and responsibility, do we really have to teach them how to lead people that are older and have more experiences than them?
I think that first of all, we have an instructional ecosystem, and oftentimes we focus on one thing or the other. And that one of the things that have been missing is mentorship for leadership. So you can teach people sort of concepts of leaders and give them the chance to role play. But really the most significant part as you start grooming leaders, we've seen this across history. It's the mentorship piece and the apprenticeship piece. So I think we have to start thinking about how we can start mentoring better. Baby boomers did a lousy job of mentoring. They just really knowledge was power, and we all had to scrap and fight for our jobs, so we just really didn't share very well. And the mentorship in general, there were some outstanding specifics, was pretty poor. And so I think we have to re-examine at what level, at what piece of the instructional works the best for a particular need, And I think mentoring and pairing people, not only to learn the bottom-up sort of the tools, but how would then you use it in leadership in a policy frame or an agency frame. So I think it's more of a give and take when this hierarchy piece has, it's not working so well, especially in these overall collaborative environments. So I think we have to re-look at how do you acknowledge people, how do you value them, and how do you train them to really take over leadership, because they're going to be our workforce. You can't pretend they're not, right?
Somewhat outside of my lane, but Paulette's here to talk to that aspect. I don't think I can add value to that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we have a number of mentorship programs. I don't know that we are specifically focusing on that aspect of it with the intent that, we need to make sure that these people really do understand how to be good leaders. One of the things that we did have, the State Department didn't have before, was Colin Powell, Secretary of State. He was the person who started our leadership school at the Foreign Service Institute, and we are required as civil servants to go to leadership training, both the 13, 14, and the 15 level, and that's required for all employees at those levels. And it is to try and get us more aware of, what does it mean to be a good manager and a good leader, and how does that work within the department?
So we have digital natives, we also have digital foreigners, digital immigrants. And I'm wondering about how you're addressing the cultural differences and bridging any gaps that you might see. So for example, the digital natives sometimes are very impatient. They want to get things done really, really fast. And there are cases on records of more senior people looking at this as ineptitude, or maybe digital natives have very, very different protocols for communication. Really, really quick, short, typed out messages, text messages, for example, as opposed to a formally written memo. These sorts of things. How do you see, or do you have any policies or strategies in place for evolving communications and collaboration among the generations?
The norming that occurs in this environment is amazing. When I say norming, folks that are right and left of the mainstream will over time converge with the feedback from the rest of the world. Whether you're posting it in Telepedia, or you have a tweet, or things that are outside the bounds of what's reasonable, there's comments. People don't hesitate to converge, so that we have this convergence towards professionalism, have this convergence to understanding what's right and wrong. Folks that bring too much of X, Y, or Z to the collaborative shared space, there's feedback. It doesn't come from us. We try to let, literally as a service provider, stay out of that facet of the content, because it's content that's curated by the community, and generally the community are professionals, and everything's attributable in everything we do. So if Paulette makes a post that's really bizarre, everybody knows that it's Paulette's post, and her peers, her professionals will comment on Paulette's post, or whatever it happens to be, to bring her to the center, and it's in a positive way. So we found as a technology provider, we have those standards, terms of use that are, is it patently offensive? Does it violate policy? And we have lots of policies, but after that, it becomes more the community policing itself through attribution, and the results are phenomenal.
I would agree with Alex. I mean, we don't have any formal policies about this or rules per se, but it's very much about, I spend, for instance, a lot of time, I have a lot of younger workers who work for me, and it's explaining, why we do the crazy things that we do, because it is true. From the outside, it looks like it doesn't make sense, but sometimes we really do have a method to the madness. So explaining why, we have to use an informational memo versus just sending a text or an email about this, why that holds more weight at the department, or why we're still using telegrams, for instance, and why that is our official command and control way of communicating to all of our embassies and consulates. Definitely the telegram thing is the one they really shake their heads at. What? That's so old, is what I usually hear, and then we have to explain these things. So a lot of it is cultural. You know, how is the Department of State as a culture? Why do we do the things that we do, and explaining that to them with the knowledge that they don't necessarily understand. And we have to give them the benefit of the doubt from that perspective.
Alex, as an ex-intelligence analyst, one of the problems has always been the how do you capture tradecraft? Has all of this helped in the capturing of tradecraft and maybe even extended it?
I believe so. If nothing else from the continuity. What used to be in someone's safe now has the ability to be in media that has persistence. At the very basic level, playbooks to how to respond to an incident. Because there's always a swirl of people coming and going. Playbooks where if this activity or this event occurs here, here's how we respond. Here's what tools we'll use. Here's where you'll post. Here's what chat room you'll participate in. Where these playbooks are codified. When I say codified, it's in that specific intel analytical cell codified on how to do these things. And then when there's turnover, it's all there. And then it continues to improve since it's not shoved in someone's safe file cabinet drawer or whatever. So in an absolute positive way, bringing the technologies to bear on that transition that we have with staffing has been phenomenal. At the most basic level, you'll see folks coming from theater where they'll document the existence and when they're deployed at XYZ location, where some of the basics of just how to exist, they'll document, they'll put it up in a Telepedia page, equivalent of Wikipedia, where here's where these things are, here's where they're not, here's where to stay away from, here's where to avoid. And those things, leveraging digital technology, digital media, provides continuity that we just didn't have in the past, when it was very near your safe, two-door safe in the pocket.
I would say, too, that, you know, as much as we talk about emerging technologies and social media, sometimes the same old things that we've been using before are still good and still relevant, and we should still do them. One of the biggest ones, you know, for continuity of business, just like DoD, we have a workforce that rotates every 2 to 3 years. So it's really important for us to figure out, especially when we're talking about community management, how do we continue the same tone? How do we, because people can tell when it's a different person responding in that community. How do we maintain the same ideas and the same direction that we were headed when we started that community? So we really do go back and ask people to really think about doing good planning, you know, having that strategy in place so that when they rotate, and it just has to be a list of bullets, it doesn't necessarily have to be very formal, but it is something for the next person to go, okay, this is what they were doing, this is what they were thinking as they built these communities, and this is what I need to do next. And of course, you know, just like Alex, we determine what are those hot button issues within that specific geographic location, and then try to figure out what are the potential ways that we would respond to some of those.
You sort of mentioned that the digital natives are learning or trying to adapt to the culture itself. How have the digital natives impacted and changed how things are done?
I think from my perspective, the biggest impact is the democratization of information, where the lowest ranking guy in the federal government or the Department of Defense or State Department, whatever you happen to call it, an E1 in the military or a GS 1 or 2, when they make a post and it has the same visibility as the highest ranking guy in the whole community. And that democratization, the leveling of the playing field, where if you're judged on the merit of what you're contributing as opposed to your rank or position, I think it scared a lot of folks. And at the same time, it allows this incredibly rapid flow of information from top to bottom. Because yeah, there is still a hierarchy, but you're not throttled by your position or encumbered by your position to get your voice heard by the masses. And that's radically changed at times the way folks operate. And it's also put some fear into the guys and gals that, you know, your knowledge is power, so I better control all the knowledge or information on this topic or you know, international crisis because my power is equated to my knowledge on that topic. And if it is out in the community shared space, I for some reason feel marginalized. That naivete on the collaborative approach to getting things done. I see it's going away over time, and whether it's because of the digital natives, or I think it's more towards people see mission accomplishment through leveraging these things as opposed to anything else.
I would say too that we've been finding that it used to be, you had to be an undersecretary or above in order to go out and publicly speak. And one of the ways in the State Department that we've started to empower our employees has been to allow lower level people to go out. 9 times out of 10, those are Generation Y, Generation X people going out and leading either formal classes or speaking at events like this or other conferences, not only around the DC area, but across the country. And it's really had a significant impact on the public's perception of what this Department of State does. They have much more knowledge about how do things really work internally in the department, or not, as the case may be. How is it that we're leveraging some of these tools and technologies and some of the other kind of interesting initiatives that in the past you maybe didn't get to hear a lot about. Any other?
With Gen Y and Boomers all moving at different speeds, you said norming resolves a lot of the problems. So when you add in change in the agency from MySpace to Facebook, and then changes from the outside world from Facebook to Instagram, do all the moving parts normalize effectively?
It's just a training thing. I mean, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight by any means. We constantly battle the fact that all these platforms are changing every day. Facebook is a bit of the bane of my existence because every time they change, I have to review all the documentation that we have, helping our community managers better leverage that tool and technology. So one of the ways we do help with that normalizing is through the resources that we develop. So we provide how-to guides, we call them field guides, for each, or the predominantly large platforms that we are using for public engagement. And they're how-to guides. They tell you exactly how to set up your account, how to market that account, how to build the community. It does incorporate all the security issues, privacy issues, best practices, not only from government, but also from private sector. And it's to help people better feel comfortable with when they're running these accounts. I have a very small team, which means I can't service 260 locations around the world effectively, and all the employees that go with it who want to use social media. I'm also not a 24/7 shop, so that means that I have to do a lot of do-it-yourself resources to help better empower employees to do what they need to do.
So we have about 4 minutes left, and we have one more question, then we'll just wrap up. Thinking about what you.
So with all these people going out and being able to post, I'm sure that sooner or later, or in the past, you've had some people make some missteps and post some of the wrong stuff. I get that training helps to prevent that and teach them after the fact. How are you discovering when somebody puts out something that's problematic, and how do you deal with it when that happens?
My answer is easier, so I'll go first.
Okay.
We have actually a formal spills process when we're alerted on the inside that somebody's posted something, even on the inside, that it doesn't belong on that fabric. Maybe you posted a top secret document on a secret fabric. We have a formal spills process which goes through, understands who posted it, how it was posted, who's looked at that content, and then technically sanitizes it. And if a communication plan needs to be put in place to do an impact assessment, that's all done. And it happens day in and day out, very structured. Just like waking up in the morning, there's a way to do it, and we got it down.
So for us, we've been really lucky, first off. We haven't had a major anything happen, which is good. At least none that we specifically know of, and I'm sure if it was major, we'd know about it. We do have some monitoring tools in place to kind of look at some of those things. In fact, we're looking at social media management systems down the pipe to not only look at what's happening on the outside, but also how do we better manage our communities and what's on them. But for the most part, our largest risk for being online in the public as the government is potential loss of reputation. So that really is the biggest thing. So, we have made mistakes. We had a consular officer here in DC during the Arab Spring who was tweeting, and he was only one guy, and he was supposed to be doing a 24/7 job. That wasn't really what he was supposed to be doing, but it is the job became a 24/7 job when you had American citizens who were trying to leave Egypt, and how did we communicate information in real time to them to get them the information they need. Twitter was one of the biggest ways that we did that. Well, the guy was running on like no sleep, and it had been, you know, almost 24 hours that he'd been up, and he saw something that came out, and they said, you know, post this to Twitter, and he did, and it was go to the airport now. Well, that makes sense, right? But the problem was it was said during curfew hours, so they couldn't leave, so it was a miscommunication, right? There could have been a potential loss of life there. He realized as soon as he sent it that that was not right, and he sent the corrected one out and then asked other people who, predominantly traditional media outlets who were following him, to please make sure that the corrected information went out. And we all worked together as a team and made sure that the correct information went out there. But you know, it's very easy on Twitter to send the wrong thing or say the wrong thing. So we definitely have tried to train our people that it's okay. We know you're going to mess up occasionally. Apologize and move on. Don't dwell on it. Just keep on going because we know it's going to be there.
I'm just going to, for the last couple of minutes, thank all of you for coming. The digital natives are here, and they're going to be taking over more and more responsible positions in government. They're not going to tolerate a rock for a computer. They're going to want to interact with each other. No one wants to put the government at risk. But they also want to be able to do their job the best that they can, and they're used to being connected, crowdsourcing ideas, and bringing their own device, which has a lot more bells and whistles than any of us could ever provide. So how can we meet that challenge in the future rather than saying, what was it, the no department? The Office of No, because I have one of those all of my very own. So I am encouraged that if the government wants to have a meaningful interaction and learn and actually grow and get better, because I don't think they're destroying our traditional culture, but I believe that it's improving it in many ways, as we've heard today. It's the blending of the cultures. And so I encourage you, when you have policy stuff you have to make, or you want to know what's the best tools to bring in, don't imagine you know. Bring them on your committees. They're usually the ones that never get asked what would work and have some input. So they're here to stay. Let's mentor them into leadership and let's give them a voice. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming.
Thank you, everybody.